You've been trying to heal, and somehow you've been hurting yourself in the process. Not on purpose, but in that subtle way where every hard day becomes proof you're not doing this right. The way you look back at your reactions, your tears, your overthinking, your silence, and you silently grade yourself as if your humanity has a performance review. And I want you to hear this with all the tenderness it deserves. Nothing about your struggle disqualifies you from love. Just take a breath right now if you can, and notice what happens in your shoulders when you stop trying to be impressive for a moment. Notice if something in you softens, even slightly, as you realize you don't have to earn the right to be held, especially not by yourself. You've been carrying an invisible pressure to become better before you're allowed to rest, better before you're allowed to feel proud, better before you're allowed to be gentle. And it's exhausting, isn't it? That constant inner expectation that you should be further along by now, that you should be past this trigger, that you should have learned your lesson, that if you were truly growing, you wouldn't still feel what you feel. And the hardest part is how lonely it can be. Because from the outside, you might look like you're doing fine. You might be the one who keeps going, who shows up, who handles things. You might even be the one people depend on. And yet inside, there's this private war where your pain comes up, and instead of comfort, it meets criticism. Not always loud criticism. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, responsible sounding. Why are you still upset? You know better than this. You're being too sensitive. You're overreacting again. Come on, get it together. And when that voice shows up, it can feel like it's trying to help you, like it's trying to keep you safe, like if it can just tighten the reins enough, I'll finally become the version of you who never falls apart, never gets triggered, never needs anything. But listen, healing isn't a test you pass. It's a relationship you build. And self-compassion isn't a reward for doing it perfectly. It's the environment your healing needs in order to grow. Let that settle for a moment. Because so many people have been taught, directly or indirectly, that kindness is something you receive when you've behaved, that tenderness is something you get when you've achieved, that love is conditional, and the condition is, don't be messy. So if you grew up in a world where you were praised for being strong, for being helpful, for being easy, for being high-achieving, then of course compassion feels unfamiliar in the middle of your pain. Of course you learn to offer support to others and pressure to yourself. Of course you became someone who could soothe everyone else while quietly neglecting your own trembling heart. You didn't become hard on yourself because you're broken. You became hard on yourself because at some point it felt necessary. If you've been harsh with yourself, it's because somewhere along the way you learned that being hard was the only way to survive. And that makes so much sense, because self-compassion grows the way all living things grow, through attention, consistency, and care, not through force, not through shame, not through fear. So here is what I want to leave you with, as a blessing you can carry quietly through your day. You are allowed to heal at the pace your heart requires. You are allowed to be imperfect while you grow. You are allowed to have hard days without turning them into proof you're failing. You are allowed to be a work in progress and still be worthy of love. And if today you can do just one thing, let it be this. When you notice yourself hurting, come closer instead of pulling away. Place a hand on your heart or take one steady breath and remember, you are not abandoning yourself. And in that choice, your healing becomes a gentler kind of miracle. There's a part of you that believes compassion is something you receive after you've earned it, after you've changed, after you've fixed the habit, after you've healed the wound, after you've stopped needing reassurance, after you've stopped feeling afraid. And I want to gently ask you something. Have you noticed how your inner kindness often gets postponed? Like it's always scheduled for a future version of you that's more together? When I'm calmer, I'll be kinder to myself. When I stop doing this, I'll finally respect myself. When I've healed, then I'll feel worthy. But your heart already knows this. The version of you who deserves compassion is not the future you. It's you. Right now, even here, even like this, especially like this. Because the most sacred moment for compassion isn't when you're proud of yourself. It's when you're disappointed. It's when you're embarrassed. It's when you're afraid you've ruined it. It's when your nervous system is flooded and you can't think straight and you're doing that old thing again, people pleasing, shutting down, spiraling, snapping, numbing, overworking, scrolling, eating, isolating. That's not the moment to withdraw love. That's the moment to come closer. And yes, I said come closer. This is important to hear. The places in you that feel least lovable are not asking for punishment. They are asking for safety. Now let's talk about something most people don't name clearly enough. The voice that drives you, pushes you, critiques you, keeps you on track, often claims to be motivation. It claims to be discipline. It claims to be the only reason you've survived this far. But what if the voice that calls itself motivation is actually shame wearing a responsible mask? Shame can sound so grown up. Shame can sound like high standards. Shame can sound like self-awareness. Shame says, if I'm hard on you now, you won't be humiliated later. Shame says, if I push you, you'll finally become safe. Shame says, if I point out everything wrong, maybe you won't be rejected. And it's clever because it borrows the language of improvement while leaving you feeling smaller. So here's something to notice, not with judgment, just with honesty. When you criticize yourself, do you actually change with ease? Or do you tighten, rebel, collapse, and secretly feel hopeless? Because self-attack rarely creates true transformation. Self-attack creates compliance, fear, burnout, and emotional hiding, and the part of you that's trying to heal can't heal while being hunted. Just breathe with me again, and if it feels available, place a hand somewhere that feels comforting, your chest, your belly, your upper arm, and let your body receive the message that you are not in trouble for being human. Now, I'm going to share something with you that can change how you understand your entire healing journey. Self-compassion is not self-pity. Self-compassion is not letting yourself get away with things. Self-compassion is not giving up on growth. Self-compassion is nervous system safety. It's the inner environment where your truth can finally come out without fearing punishment. When you meet your pain with softness, you're not excusing anything. You're finally creating safety. And safety is what allows the deeper pattern to reveal itself. Think about it. If a child is terrified of being yelled at, do they tell the truth? Or do they hide, perform, and pretend? Your inner world is like that too. If your system expects attack, it will protect itself through defenses, denial, blame, numbing, perfectionism, control, avoidance. But when you create gentleness, your system begins to trust. And when it trusts, it reveals. It reveals the need underneath the habit. It reveals the fear underneath the anger. It reveals the grief underneath the numbness. It reveals the longing underneath the control. This is why compassion is not a luxury in healing. It is the doorway. Now you might be thinking, okay, but how do I do that? Because I don't feel compassionate toward myself. I feel frustrated. I feel tired. I feel disappointed. I know, and I honor that. Because sometimes the hardest person to be kind to is the one you've been living with your whole life. So let's make this real. Let's talk about the moment you slip back into old patterns and the story you tell yourself right then. Maybe you said you wouldn't text them, and you texted. Maybe you promised yourself you'd rest, and you overworked. Maybe you tried to set a boundary, and you caved. Maybe you did a week of feeling good, and then one conversation sent you into a spiral. Maybe you were doing so well, and then you shut down again. And in that moment, there's usually a story. I'm back at square one. I'll never change. What's wrong with me? I ruin everything. I can't trust myself. And something in you contracts. Your chest tightens. Your stomach drops. Your mind races. You feel exposed. That contraction is your system bracing for rejection. And the rejection is often from you. So here's a new way to meet that moment. Not with a motivational speech, not with forced positivity, with a compassionate truth that your body can actually believe. And it starts with this. You separate who you are from what happened. You are not your pattern. You are not your reaction. You are not your coping mechanism. Those are strategies you learned, often in environments where you didn't feel fully safe. If you've been repeating a pattern, it's because it once helped you survive. Let that land fully. And if you can feel it, notice how different that is from, "I'm broken." One statement creates curiosity and tenderness. The other creates shame and collapse. So in the moment of slipping, the compassionate question is not, "What's wrong with me?" The compassionate question is, "What happened to me? What got activated? What did I need that I didn't know how to ask for? What felt unsafe that made my system reach for an old tool?" This is important because the moment you become curious instead of cruel, you stop re-injuring yourself while you're already hurt. And yes, I see you. I see you trying so hard not to mess up. I see you wanting to be the healed version so badly. I see how much you want peace. And I also see how heavy it is to carry the idea that your healing has to be perfect in order to be real. It doesn't. Healing is often messy because it's honest. Now let's open a gentle loop here, because there's something most spiritual conversations skip right over. And it's the key to why self-compassion can feel so hard. It's not that you don't know how to be kind, it's that a part of you believes kindness is unsafe. We'll come back to this, and when we do, you'll understand your resistance in a whole new way. For now, just notice whether that statement sparks anything in you, even a small nod, even a tiny sting of recognition. Because if you've been raised in a world where love came with conditions, then kindness might feel like losing control, like letting things slide, like being weak. And that's not your fault. It's conditioning. Now here's what I've come to understand. Self-compassion is not a personality trait. It's a practice, a relationship, a skill. And like any skill, it can feel awkward at first, especially if you've mostly practiced self-criticism. So let's make self-compassion practical and specific. There is a simple way to practice self-compassion that doesn't feel fake, even when you don't believe it yet. It's a 3-part grounding that you can do in under a minute, right in the middle of a hard moment. The first part is, name what's happening gently, not dramatically, not as a story, just as a truth. This is a hard moment. I'm feeling ashamed right now. My nervous system is activated. I'm scared. I'm overwhelmed. Do you feel the difference? It's not, "I'm a mess." It's, "I'm in a hard moment." That's compassion, because it acknowledges reality without turning reality into identity. The second part is normalize it without minimizing. This is part of being human. Many people would feel this in my situation. It makes sense that I'm struggling. This is a tender place in me. And the third part is, offer one true kindness. Not a grand statement you don't believe. One true kindness. One sentence that your body can accept. I'm here with you. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm not abandoning you. We can take this one breath at a time. It's okay to be learning. Just one. And then you breathe. And maybe you soften your jaw and you let your body feel what it's like to be met instead of managed. This is not fluff. This is rewiring. Because every time you respond to yourself with kindness in a moment of distress, you teach your system a new association. Pain does not equal danger. Emotion does not equal punishment. And over time, that changes everything. Now let's return to what I mentioned earlier. That part of you that believes kindness is unsafe. This is one of the most tender truths in healing. For many people, self-criticism became a form of control. If I criticize myself first, maybe I can prevent others from criticizing me. If I stay ahead of my flaws, maybe I won't be rejected. If I push myself hard, maybe I'll finally be worthy. So compassion can feel like stepping off a cliff, because the old strategy says, if you stop pushing, you'll fall. But what if you've been falling because you've been pushing? What if the pressure has been the reason you can't breathe? What if the inner war has been slowing your growth, not speeding it up? Your heart already knows this. You were never meant to heal through punishment. Punishment might create short-term behavior change, but it does not create lasting self-trust. And self-trust is what makes growth sustainable. So let's talk about accountability, because I know that's the fear for many people. You can hold yourself accountable without abandoning yourself, and your body can feel the difference. Accountability without compassion says, you failed, fix it. Accountability with compassion says, that didn't align with what you want. What support do you need? Do you hear the shift? One approach shames you into change. The other supports you with integrity. And integrity, real integrity, is not forced. It's chosen. It's what happens when you feel safe enough to be honest. And maybe this is a moment to ask, what happens when you are honest with yourself? Do you punish yourself for the truth? Or do you meet yourself with respect? Because if honesty leads to punishment, your system will hide. But if honesty leads to care, your system will reveal. So self-compassion actually makes you more accountable because it makes you more honest. Now let's take this deeper into the lived reality of your day-to-day healing. There are certain moments when self-compassion matters most. When you're triggered, when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're comparing yourself, when you feel behind, when you've disappointed yourself, when you're grieving someone you used to be. And that last one is so important, because part of healing is mourning the version of you who didn't know what you know now. You might look back and you'd feel regret. Regret for staying too long. Regret for leaving too late. Regret for tolerating. Regret for people-pleasing. Regret for ignoring your intuition. and that regret can turn into cruelty. How could I have done that? I should have known. I wasted my time. I was so foolish. Oh, sweetheart, you were not foolish. You were doing the best you could with the safety, awareness, and support you had then. And if you can let that be true, something in you will unclench, because regret can become wisdom when it's held with compassion. But regret becomes poison when it's held with shame. So here's a gentle practice for regret. The next time you feel yourself turning against your past, try this. Speak to your past self as if you are sitting beside them, not above them, not judging them, beside them. And you might say, I understand why you did that. I see how scared you were. You were trying to be loved. You were trying to stay safe. You were trying to make it through. And then, thank you for surviving. I've got it from here. Let that settle for a moment, because part of nurturing self-compassion is becoming the safe person inside you, the one you may not have had outside you. Now, I want to offer you a truth that can transform how you relate to your inner critic. The inner critic is not your enemy. It's a protector, a misguided protector, a part of you that learned, if I'm hard, we won't get hurt. So instead of fighting it, you can meet it. And when you meet it, you take away its power. Here's what you might try the next time that critical voice rises. Instead of arguing with it, you say, I hear you, you're trying to protect me. And then you ask, what are you afraid will happen if you stop pushing me? You might be surprised by the answer, because underneath that harshness is usually fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of being left, fear of failing, fear of being too much, fear of not being enough. And when you meet fear with compassion, fear doesn't have to shout. Fear can soften. Now, let's bring compassion into the body, because compassion is not only a thought, it's a felt experience. Your body already recognizes this truth. When you are kind to yourself, your muscles change, your breath changes, your eyes soften, your nervous system receives the signal, we are safe. So I want to give you a tiny embodied ritual you can do anytime, especially in the middle of your day. It takes about 15 seconds. You pause. You exhale slowly. You soften your tongue in your mouth. You let your shoulders drop half an inch. And you say, out loud if you can, or quietly inside, this moment is allowed. That's it. This moment is allowed. Not this moment is good. Not this moment is how it should be. Just this moment is allowed. Because what creates suffering is not only pain, it's resistance to pain. It's the inner statement. This shouldn't be happening. So when you allow the moment, your system stops fighting reality, and it can finally move through it. And yes, You can allow the moment while still wanting things to change. Allowing is not surrendering your desires. Allowing the war. Now let me tell you a brief story, just enough to let something click. I once knew someone who was devoted to healing the way you might be, reading, practicing, reflecting, doing all the right things. And every time she felt triggered, she'd punish herself with analysis. She'd spend hours trying to figure out what was wrong with her, why she wasn't past it, why she kept getting pulled back into the same feelings. One day, she finally said, exhausted, "I think I'm failing at healing." And I told her, "No, you're failing at being kind to yourself while you heal." That's when she cried. Not because it was a new idea, but because something in her recognized the truth she'd been missing. You're being given the same invitation. Can you feel how different that is? Healing with harshness is like trying to grow a garden in a storm while yelling at the seeds to hurry. Healing with compassion is like tending the soil, and you don't have to force a seed to open. You just give it warmth, water, time, and it breaks open in its own sacred way. That's you. Now, because this is practical, I want to give you another tool for the moments when you feel like you're not doing enough. This is where so many sensitive, growth-oriented people get trapped. They wake up with a list in their mind. They measure themselves by productivity. They feel guilty for resting. They feel guilty for needing help. They feel guilty for not being high vibe. And if this is you, I want to offer you a compassionate reframe. Rest is not a pause in your healing. Rest is a part of your healing. If you've been craving stillness, it's because your system is reorganizing itself. It's because you're integrating. It's because your body is asking for time to absorb what your mind has been processing. So instead of forcing yourself through, you might ask, what would support me right now? Support might be a glass of water. Support might be stepping outside for 2 minutes. Support might be texting someone safe. Support might be lying down without bargaining. Support might be doing one thing instead of 10. And if you notice resistance to that, if you hear a voice that says, "That's not enough," that's the old contract talking. The old contract that says you have to earn rest. But your worth is not transactional. Your worth is inherent. Now, let's talk about compassion when you're in relationship with others, because that's where healing often gets tested. You might be learning boundaries. You might be learning to speak up. You might be learning to stop over-explaining. And when you try something new, you will wobble. You will say it awkwardly. You will backtrack. You will get scared. You will sometimes overcompensate. This is normal. If you've been expanding your boundaries, it's because you're building a new self, one that doesn't abandon itself to keep the peace. And in that process, self-compassion sounds like this. It makes sense that this feels hard. I'm learning. I'm allowed to practice. I'm allowed to be imperfect while I grow. Notice that word, allowed. Allowed is a compassionate doorway. Now here's an open loop I want to offer you, because there's one place self-compassion becomes truly transformational, and most people miss it. It's not in your big, dramatic breakthroughs. It's in your smallest daily moments. We'll come back to how to build compassion into your everyday life so it becomes automatic, not occasional, and it will change how you move through your week. But first, I want to address something tender, the feeling of being behind. This one is so common and so rarely spoken about honestly. You might feel behind in healing, behind in life, behind in clarity, behind in love, behind compared to who you thought you'd be by now. And if you carry that feeling, you might treat yourself like you're late, like you're failing, like you have to rush. But your heart already knows this. You are not behind. You are in process, and the process has seasons. Some seasons look like growth and outward movement. Some seasons look like stillness and deep integration. Some seasons look like undoing, and undoing is not regression, it's released. If things have been unraveling for you, relationships, identities, beliefs, plans, it might be because you're no longer willing to build your life on what doesn't fit. Unraveling can be holy. Unraveling can be the beginning of truth. And in an unraveling season, self-compassion is the hand that holds you steady. So when you feel behind, try this. Instead of saying, I should be over this, say, this is what my heart is working through right now. Instead of, I'm taking too long, say, I'm taking the time I need. Instead of, I'm failing, say, I'm learning how to be with myself. Let that settle, because the way you speak to yourself becomes the atmosphere you live in. And you deserve an atmosphere that allows you to breathe. Now, let's return to the everyday compassion I teased, the small moments. Because the deepest healing doesn't happen in one giant realization. It happens in micro moments of choice. The moment you catch the self-attack and choose a kinder sentence. The moment you notice your body tightening and you soften. The moment you forgive yourself for being tired. The moment you stop explaining and simply honor your no. The moment you meet your tears without trying to fix them. This is how you nurture self-compassion, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming a safe place for who you already are. So here's a daily practice that's gentle, realistic, and deeply effective. At the end of your day, just for 30 seconds, ask yourself, where did I abandon myself today? Not to shame yourself, to witness yourself. And then ask, what would it look like to come back to myself tomorrow? Maybe it's one boundary. Maybe it's one pause. Maybe it's one honest truth. Maybe it's one moment of rest without guilt. And then you offer yourself one sentence of compassion for today. Something like, I did the best I could with what I had. I was doing my best to feel fine. I'm proud of myself for trying. I'm learning. I'm still worthy of love. You might notice resistance at first. That's okay. Resistance doesn't mean it's false. Resistance often means it's new. And new can feel unsafe until it becomes familiar. Now I want to speak directly to the part of you that thinks compassion has to feel perfect. It doesn't. Self-compassion can be shaky. Self-compassion can be quiet. Self-compassion can be as simple as not piling on. Sometimes compassion is not saying something kind. It's choosing not to say something cruel. That counts, and that matters. So if you can't access warmth, access neutrality. If you can't say, I love myself, say, I'm willing to be on my own side. If you can't say, I'm proud of myself, say, I'm not giving up on me. If you can't say, I forgive myself, say, I'm open to forgiveness. This is how you build the bridge. And over time, the bridge becomes a home. Now, let's talk about growth, because your title includes both healing and growing, and that's important. Growth without compassion becomes pressure. Healing without growth can become avoidance. But when compassion holds both, you become whole. So what does it mean to grow with compassion? It means you don't demand perfection. You choose alignment again and again. You take responsibility without self-hatred. You tell the truth without shaming yourself for having it. You correct gently like you would guide someone you deeply care about. Imagine guiding a dear friend. If they forgot, you wouldn't scream at them. If they struggled, you wouldn't call them hopeless. You would say, okay, we're here. What do you need? What's the next loving step? You can speak to yourself that way. And if that feels strange, it's only because you've been speaking to yourself in a language you never deserved. So let's rewrite the language. When you make a mistake, instead of, how could you try? Oh, there you are. Something needed care. When you fall into a pattern, instead of, you ruined it, try, we're back here. Let's get curious. When you feel overwhelmed, instead of, you can't handle life, try, this is a lot. Let's slow down. When you need support, instead of, you're too much, try, you're allowed to need. That's compassion. And compassion is powerful. Not soft in a weak way, soft in a strong way. Like water. Water doesn't force the rock, and yet, over time, it shapes it. That's the kind of strength you're learning now. Now, I want to offer you 2 anchor phrases to repeat this week, not as a performance, but as a gentle reorientation. The first is, I'm not abandoning myself. Say it when you feel tempted to self-attack. Say it when you feel ashamed. Say it when you're spiraling. I'm not abandoning myself. And the second is, this is a hard moment, and I can be kind in it. Not perfect in it, kind in it. These phrases aren't magic spells, they're relationship vows. And every time you say them, you deepen trust. Now there's one more tender piece. Sometimes we don't allow compassion because we think we don't deserve it. We think our mistakes disqualify us. We think our past disqualifies us. We think our anger disqualifies us. We think our mess disqualifies us. But compassion isn't something you deserve like a grade. It's something you are worthy of because you exist. And if you could let one truth land today, let it be this. You are not a problem to solve. You are a person to love. Let that settle for a moment, and as it settles, notice your breath. Notice the part of you that wants to cry or sigh or soften. That part is not a weakness. That part is your heart recognizing home. Because somewhere deep inside, you've always known you were never meant to heal through punishment. You were meant to heal through presence, through gentleness, through truth held with love. So as you move forward, you might start to notice small changes, not dramatic, not loud, but real. You might catch the critic sooner. You might pause before you spiral. You might soften your body when you're triggered. You might choose to rest without so much negotiation. You might speak to yourself like someone you actually want to live with. And when those moments happen, even if they're tiny, let yourself notice. Let yourself feel proud.